June 4th, 1942. For 30 hours. North Pacific Ocean, 300 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. He is black and flat, breathing slowly beneath the hulls. Aboard the Japanese carrier Akagi, red lantern light barely cuts through the pre-dawn gloom. Flight deck crews move without speaking, boots soft against steel. The smell of aviation fuel hangs heavy, sharp in the cold air. Far below deck, engines begin to turn. One by one, measured, controlled. This is not fear. This is confidence. Admiral Chuchi Nagumo stands rigid on the bridge, binoculars lowered, eyes fixed on a horizon where the sky is just beginning to pale. He believes the enemy is broken. Pearl Harbor saw to that. Coral Sea was proof enough. The Americans, in his mind, are wounded, slow, predictable. Across 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, over 240 aircraft are being armed. Torpedoes gleam under deck lamps. Bombs are wheeled forward, their metal skins cold with dew. Pilots adjust scarves, tighten gloves, exchange quick nods. They have trained for this moment for years. Midway will be destroyed by sunrise. The American carriers will appear late, if they appear at all. And when they do, they will die. High above the formation, a Japanese scout plane drones eastward, its engine a thin whine swallowed by the vast sky. Its pilot scans empty water, reporting nothing unusual. The radio crackles once. Then silence. What Nagumo does not see, what no one on these decks can see, is that the war has already slipped out of their hands. Hundreds of miles away, in darkened American command rooms, radar screens glow faint green. Operators lean closer. Code breakers check times and bearings. Carrier decks are already alive with motion, not confidence, but urgency. The Japanese believe the night still belongs to them. They are wrong. As the first Zero engines roar to life, far beyond the horizon, unseen eyes are already watching and counting. The radar antenna on Midway Atoll turns slowly against the gray dawn. At 5:52 hours, a thin blip crawls across the screen. Then another, then dozens more. The operator stiffens, hand hovering over the phone. Multiple contacts, he says quietly. Bearing 320. Within seconds, the island jolts awake. Sirens scream. Marines sprint from sandbag revetments. Anti-aircraft crews swing guns skyward, metal clanging, hands shaking not from fear, but from speed. Above the atoll, the Japanese strike force breaks through the clouds. Zeros first, then dive bombers, then level bombers fly in tight, disciplined formations. Sunlight flashes off wings marked with red Hinomaru. Bomb bay doors open. The sky begins to fall. Explosions rip across the runway. Fuel dumps erupt in fireballs. Coral dust and smoke choke the air. American fighters claw upward, outnumbered, engines screaming as they dive headlong into the swarm. One Wildcat catches fire. Another spirals into the sea. On Midway, radar has done its job, but it cannot stop what is coming. Yet even as the island burns, the real danger lies far beyond the smoke. Aboard the American carrier Enterprise, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey studies a map spread across the ready room table. Sweat beads on his neck. The timing is wrong. The enemy should be here already. Unless, on the bridge, Admiral Raymond Spruance listens as reports arrive in clipped, urgent bursts. Radar contacts. Scout sightings. Intercepted transmissions decoded overnight by station HYPO in Hawaii. The Japanese are coming exactly where intelligence said they would. That changes everything. Below deck, American pilots climb into cockpits with little ceremony. Torpedoes are slung beneath TBD devastators. Slow, fragile aircraft with crews who understand the odds. Dive bombers idle nearby. Engines coughing, waiting for a launch order that could send them into history. This is no ambush by luck. It is a trap built from math, patience, and invisible waves bouncing through the air. As Japanese aircraft turn back toward their carriers, low on fuel and confident in success, Admiral Nagumo faces a decision, one that must be made quickly, and without knowing that American carriers are already moving into striking range. He orders the decks cleared. and begins a sequence that will doom the Imperial Navy. On Akagi's flight deck, order replaces chaos. Aircraft returning from Midway thump onto steel. Tires screeching, arresting wires snapping taut. Ground crews swarm forward, guiding planes into position. Folding wings, dragging hoses. Engines are still ticking with heat as pilots climb out, faces smeared with sweat and cordite. Reports come in fast. Midway neutralized. Enemy fighters minimal. Second strike recommended. Admiral Nagumo listens, jaw tight. His original plan called for a follow-up attack on the island. But now, a different message reaches the bridge. A delayed scout report. An American task force. Possibly carriers spotted to the east. Possibly. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Nagumo hesitates, then decides. The planes already armed with bombs for land targets must be rearmed with torpedoes for ships. Deck crews reverse the process. Bombs are rolled back into hangars. Torpedoes are wheeled forward. Fuel lines snake across the deck. Planes are packed tightly, wingtip to wingtip, stacked in hangars below. This takes time. And time is something the Japanese no longer have. Below deck, the hangars become floating arsenals. Bombs sit uncapped. Torpedoes gleam under bare bulbs. Fuel vapors thicken, invisible and deadly. One spark would be enough. Above, Nagumo watches the sea through binoculars, still convinced the Americans will strike late, as they always do. What he does not know is that American squadrons are already in the air. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet flies low, skimming wave tops, engines straining. Their commander, Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, knows they are alone, knows the fighters are gone, knows the odds. They fly on anyway. Japanese lookouts spot them first. Tiny specks growing larger, too slow, too low. Zeros peel off instantly, diving like hawks. The sky fills with tracers. One by one, the devastators are shredded. Planes explode. Crews vanish into the sea. But they do not die for nothing. As Zeros chase the torpedo planes down the waves, the Japanese Combat Air Patrol is dragged low and away. High above the clouds, unseen and unopposed, American dive bombers are arriving, and the decks of the Japanese carriers are still full. At 10:20 hours, the clouds tear apart. From 6,000 feet above the Japanese fleet, the American dive bombers finally see them. For carriers cutting white wakes through deep blue water, decks crowded with aircraft, fuel lines still stretched, crews frozen mid-task. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey rolls his SBD Dauntless onto its back and points the nose straight down. The world becomes wind and screaming metal. Dive brakes howl. The ocean rushes upward. Pilots strain against their harnesses as altimeters spin wildly. Tracers rise too late, arcing uselessly behind them. The Japanese lookouts have seconds, not minutes. Seconds. On Kaga, sailors glance skyward in disbelief. On Soryu, a gun crew fumbles to bring a cannon around. On Akagi, Admiral Nagumo turns just in time to see black crosses blot out the sun. Bombs fall. One punches through Kaga's flight deck, detonating in the hangar packed with fueled aircraft. Another strikes near the island structure, ripping steel apart like paper. Fire flashes outward, fed instantly by aviation fuel, rolling into a wall of flame. Soryu is hit twice in rapid succession. Explosions tear through the hangar deck. Aircraft erupt. Crewmen are thrown screaming across the deck. The carrier slows and lists, smoke boiling upward in a thick, oily column. On Akagi, a single bomb hits, just one. It is enough. It detonates among armed torpedo planes, igniting fuel lines and munitions. Fire races through the hangar, unstoppable. Within minutes, the flagship of the Imperial Navy is an inferno. Japanese officers shout orders that can no longer be followed. Fire mains fail. Ammunition cooks off. Men leap into the sea to escape the heat. From the air, American pilots pull out of their dives and stare back in disbelief. 3 carriers burning in 5 minutes. But even as shock ripples through the Japanese fleet, one carrier remains untouched, Hiryu, and from her deck, Surviving commanders prepare a counterstroke that will prove the battle is not yet finished. The ocean has not claimed its final victims. Smoke darkens the sky as Hiryu turns into the wind. Her deck crews move with desperate precision. There is no panic here, only urgency sharpened by disbelief. 3 carriers are dying behind them, burning monuments to a plan that unraveled in minutes. Hiryu is alone now, but she is still alive, and she still has teeth. Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, standing on a bridge, wastes no time. Orders: snap down the chain. Dive bombers are armed. Fighters are spotted forward. Engines roar as the deck trembles beneath their weight. Within the hour, Hiryu's first strike group lifts off, climbing hard, guided by reports of American carriers to the east. They find Yorktown first. From the American carrier's deck, sailors watch the incoming Japanese dive bombers break through cloud cover, wings flashing. Anti-aircraft guns erupt. The sky fills with black bursts and tracer fire. The noise is overwhelming. Bombs fall. One slams through Yorktown's flight deck, exploding deep inside. Another detonates near the island, sending shards of steel screaming across the deck. Fires bloom instantly. Power fails. The ship slows, then stops, dead in the water. For a moment, it looks fatal. But damage control teams move fast. Hoses snake across the deck. Fires are smothered. Within an hour, Yorktown is making way again, smoke thinning, engines turning. Japanese pilots report the carrier destroyed. They are wrong. Hiryu launches a second strike, torpedo bombers this time. They find Yorktown once more, still afloat, still moving. 2 torpedoes hit her port side in quick succession. The carrier shudders violently, flooding racing through her compartments. This time, there is no recovery. Yorktown lifts heavily. Orders are given to abandon ship. Men climb down ropes, slipping into oil-slicked water as the proud carrier slowly rolls, wounded but not yet dead. From Hiryu's bridge, the reports come in. 1 American carrier sunk, another damaged. The fight, it seems, can still be salvaged. But even as Yamaguchi allows himself a brief, grim satisfaction, American radar operators are already tracking Hiryu's returning aircraft, and American dive bombers are already climbing. Late afternoon light glints off the waves as American carriers turn into the wind once more. On Enterprise and Hornet, deck crews work in silence, faces smeared with oil and sweat. There is no cheering, no celebration. The battle is not finished, not while Hiryu still floats. Radar contacts bloom across glowing screens. Bearings tighten. Distances shrink. The last Japanese carrier has been found. Dive bombers lift off in staggered waves, climbing steadily, engines droning with grim purpose. Pilots know what waits below. They have seen the smoke columns already clawing at the sky. 3 carriers dying slow, violent deaths. Now there will be a 4th. At 1700 hours, the American strike group breaks through scattered clouds and spots Hiryu below, running hard, weaving, her deck crowded once again with aircraft preparing another launch. There is no delay this time. Bombs fall almost immediately. 1 hits near the bow, blowing a crater through the flight deck. Another slams into the hangar, igniting fuel and aircraft in a violent chain reaction. Fire surges forward, rolling across the deck like a living thing. Explosions follow, sharp and relentless. Hiryu slows, then stops. On her bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi refuses evacuation. He stands calm, composed, as flames crawl closer. His decision is final. The ship will die with him. Below deck, sailors fight fires that cannot be beaten. Heat buckles steel. Smoke fills compartments. Orders become impossible to hear. As night falls, the once proud carrier burns alone, her silhouette outlined in orange against the darkening sea. By dawn, Hiryu will be scuttled by her own escorts. For carriers, for veteran air groups, the core of Japan's striking power, gone. But the full weight of what has happened does not settle immediately. Across the Pacific, radios crackle with fragments of reports. In Tokyo, admirals struggle to understand how a battle so carefully planned could collapse so completely. The answer lies not in courage or skill, but in what the Americans saw and what Japan never did. The realization is coming. Night settles over the Pacific, heavy and quiet. Wreckage drifts where carriers once ruled the sea. Oil spreads in wide, iridescent sheets. The crackle of distant fires fades, replaced by the slap of waves against debris. Survivors cling to planks, some calling out into the darkness, others already silent. Aboard the American carriers, lights remain dim. The decks are scarred, cluttered with spent casings and damaged aircraft. Men sit wherever they can, backs against bulkheads, helmets still on. No one speaks loudly. Victory feels unreal, almost accidental. But far from accidental, it was not. In a cramped operations room thousands of miles away in Pearl Harbor, maps are spread across tables. Coffee sits untouched. At Station HYPO, Commander Joseph Rockefort and his codebreakers read the latest reports with grim satisfaction. Their work, weeks of intercepted transmissions, educated guesses, and nerve, has just rewritten the war. The Japanese never knew their plans were exposed. Never knew AF meant Midway. Never knew the Americans were waiting. Radar operators aboard the carriers replay the battle in their minds. The blips appearing before eyes ever saw wings. The warnings issued minutes before bombs fell. Those minutes meant aircraft launched instead of trapped. Fighters climbed instead of burning on deck. This was a new kind of warfare. Not louder, not faster, but invisible. Japan's doctrine prized a decisive blow. The perfect strike delivered by elite aviators and powerful ships. What Midway revealed was something far more dangerous. An enemy who could see first, think faster, and strike at the exact moment confidence peaked. As dawn approaches on June 5, 1942, American patrol planes sweep the area, searching for survivors and for threats that no longer exist. The ocean looks calm again. But beneath that calm lies a truth spreading quietly through both fleets. The balance of the Pacific has shifted, not by chance, but by knowledge. And knowledge, once unleashed, cannot be sunk. Morning light reveals the cost. The sea is littered with debris, shattered wings, twisted metal, scorched life rafts. Oil slicks stretch for miles, catching the sun in dull rainbows. American patrol planes circle low, counting wreckage with a heart the Imperial Japanese Navy once sailed. For carriers, hundreds of aircraft, many of Japan's most experienced pilots, gone. Aboard the American ships, the mood shifts from tension to understanding. This was not just a victory. It was something rarer, irreversible. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz receives the first full reports with measured silence. He understands what Midway means. Japan cannot replace what was lost, not quickly, not ever in the same way. Carrier hulls can be built. Veteran air crews cannot. Across the ocean in Tokyo, the truth arrives slowly, filtered, softened. Initial reports speak of success, of American losses, of damage inflicted, but the numbers refuse to align. Messages go unanswered. Familiar call signs vanish from the airwaves. Senior officers begin to grasp it. The plan was perfect, the execution flawless, and still it failed. The realization cuts deeper than defeat. It is the understanding that the enemy now holds the initiative, that the war will not end quickly, cleanly, or on Japan's terms. Midway becomes a word spoken carefully, if at all. For the Americans, the lesson is just as stark. Victory came not from strength alone, but from preparation, adaptation, and trust in unseen systems. Radar screens, intercepted codes, quiet rooms full of men who never fired a shot. The Pacific War has turned, not with a parade, not with a declaration, but with smoke on the horizon and silence where power once lived. What follows will be longer, bloodier, and shaped forever by the moment Japan believed the war was already won. The days after Midway feel strangely empty. American carriers steam eastward through calm seas. Their decks quiet now. Aircraft lash down. Crews exhausted. The adrenaline has faded, replaced by a heavy awareness that nothing will ever be the same again. Men replay moments in their minds. The dive, the release, the sudden fire, wondering how close it all came to disaster. Because it was close. Terrifyingly close. A single delayed scout report. A few minutes longer on the Japanese decks. One bomb less accurate. Midway could have ended very differently. In briefing rooms, officers stopped talking about battleships. The age of big guns is over. The future belongs to carriers, aircraft, and information. Who sees first, who strikes first, who adapts fastest. Radar becomes sacred. Intelligence becomes a weapon. Time becomes everything. Japanese submarines scour the area, desperate for revenge, but they find only wreckage in retreating American hulls. The moment has passed. The opportunity is gone. For Japan, the psychological wound deepens. Their naval doctrine, decisive battle, annihilation blow, has failed against an enemy who refused to play by old rules. Confidence, once unshakable, begins to fracture. For American sailors, something else takes root. Belief. Belief that the Imperial Navy can be beaten. Belief that technology and training can overcome experience. Belief that this war, once terrifying and overwhelming, is now survivable. As the Pacific stretches endlessly ahead, one truth hardens like steel. The enemy is no longer invincible, and the next encounters will be fought with this knowledge. On every deck, in every cockpit, on every glowing radar screen scanning the dark for shapes that cannot hide anymore. The war has entered a new phase, and it will demand everything. Not every victory leaves a visible scar. Thousands of miles from the burning carriers, in windowless rooms and cramped ship compartments, men sit quietly at their posts, headphones pressed tight, eyes fixed on scopes glowing faint green, hands steady over switches and dials. These men will never be photographed beside wreckage. Their names will not be painted on aircraft noses. But without them, Midway never happens. Radar operators aboard Enterprise and Yorktown replay the critical moments again and again. The first faint contacts, the early warnings, the minutes gained, precious, irreplaceable minutes that allowed fighters to climb and decks to clear. At Station HYPO, code breakers return to their work almost immediately. There is no celebration, only confirmation, new intercepts, new patterns, new enemy movements already unfolding. The war does not pause for reflection. For Japan, the loss creates a vacuum. Young pilots are rushed through training, pushed forward without the seasoning of combat veterans. Doctrine stiffens instead of adapting. Pride resists change. The Americans do the opposite. Lessons from Midway are written into manuals. Radar coverage is expanded. Intelligence sharing becomes routine. Carrier task forces refine coordination between air, sea, and information. A seamless machine built not just to fight, but to anticipate. Midway is no longer a battle. It is a blueprint. As months pass, the Pacific will witness island after island contested, fleets clashing beyond the horizon, skies filled with aircraft launched not blindly, but deliberately, guided by signals the enemy still struggles to counter. The flames at Midway have long since died, but the advantage they revealed is permanent, and somewhere ahead, Japan will feel it again and again and again. In the months after Midway, something subtle changes across the Imperial Japanese Navy. Briefings grow quieter. Questions go unanswered. Certainty, once absolute, begins to fracture. Officers who once spoke of destiny now speak of probability. Pilots who trained for flawless execution now train for survival. The confidence born at Pearl Harbor never fully returns. New carriers are laid down, but steel cannot replace experience. Veteran air crews lost at Midway are gone forever, taking with them instincts honed over China, over the Indian Ocean, over years of preparation the Americans never had time for. American forces feel the shift almost immediately. At Guadalcanal, Japanese attacks lack the precision they once had. Timing falters. Coordination slips. The enemy is still dangerous, but no longer unstoppable. Radar picks them up sooner. Fighters meet them higher. Ambushes fail more often than they succeed. The psychological edge has changed hands. Japanese commanders sense it. Some try to adapt, pushing harder, risking more. Others cling to doctrine, believing aggression alone can restore what was lost. Both approaches bleed the fleet. Meanwhile, American confidence hardens into discipline. Losses still come. Ships still burn. Men still die. But there is now an understanding of how to win, and how to avoid catastrophe. Midway becomes a quiet reference point, rarely spoken aloud, always present, a reminder that preparation and patience can collapse even the strongest enemy in minutes. The war drags on, brutal and unforgiving, but the outcome is no longer unimaginable, and that, more than the wreck carriers, is Midway's most enduring legacy. Years later, the Pacific will look the same, endless, indifferent, unmarked by the battles fought upon it. But in June 1942, the ocean learned something new. It learned the sound of bombs falling from unseen heights. It learned the silence after radios went dead. It learned how power can vanish in minutes. At Midway, the war stopped being about who struck hardest and became about who understood first. Japan entered the battle believing the outcome was already written. America entered believing it had one chance, and no more. Radar screens, coded messages, and calm decisions in unseen rooms tipped the scales long before the first aircraft appeared in the sky. For carriers burned not because Japan lacked courage or skill or resolve, but because the future arrived before they were ready to see it. Every carrier battle that followed, in the Solomons, in the Philippine Sea, off Leyte, would echo Midway. The same invisible struggle would precede every explosion. Detection, interpretation, decision. By the time the war ended, this lesson would be universal. The side that sees first, decides first, wins first. The smoke at Midway has long since cleared. But the moment Japan realized the war was not already won, that moment still hangs over the Pacific, carried on radar waves, remembered by the sea itself. In shipyards along the American coast, the sound of riveting never stops. Steel plates slam into place. Sparks shower down assembly lines. Hull numbers are painted on bows that will soon face the Pacific. But Midway has changed what these ships are meant to do and how they will fight. Design meetings grow longer. Radar masts are raised higher. Combat information centers are enlarged, buried deep within hulls where information can flow even under fire. Lessons learned in minutes at Midway are hammered permanently into steel. Training changes too. Pilots no longer fly only by instinct. They fly by coordination. Strike packages are rehearsed again and again. Fighters high, torpedo planes low, dive bombers waiting above the clouds. Timing becomes doctrine. Communication becomes survival. In contrast, Japanese training grows strained. Fuel shortages limit flight hours. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer landings, fewer instincts, fewer hours under pressure. Veterans are spread thin, expected to teach and fight at the same time. The edge once held by elite Japanese aviators dulls, not through weakness, but through attrition. American radar operators grow sharper. Blips that once caused hesitation now prompt immediate action. Bearings are called out faster. Decisions shorten. Confidence becomes muscle memory. Midway is no longer a memory. It is a teacher. Every ship that sails west carries its lessons. Every young officer learns where victory truly begins. Not with bombs or torpedoes, but with awareness. The next battles will be larger, more complex, less forgiving, and both sides know it. The Pacific is preparing for something even greater than Midway. As 1942 stretches into 1943, Midway follows every fleet like a ghost. American task forces now sail in tight formations, radar screens constantly watched, fighter patrols rotating with mechanical precision. Commanders no longer wait to be surprised. They expect contact and plan for it hours in advance. The Japanese feel the difference immediately. Attacks that once struck from nowhere are now met head-on. Fighters are already climbing. Anti-aircraft guns are already tracking. Surprise, Japan's greatest weapon, fades with every encounter. At sea, distance becomes a battlefield of its own. Whoever detects first decides when and whether to fight. Radar ranges extend. Radio discipline tightens. Silence becomes tactical. For Japanese pilots, the sky grows more hostile. American fighters appear earlier, in greater numbers, guided by unseen hands. Losses mount faster than they can be replaced. Midway has not ended the war, but it has removed Japan's margin for error. Every decision now carries weight. Every mistake costs more than before. The The confidence of 1941 is gone, replaced by urgency and doubt. American commanders sense it. They press harder, take calculated risks, push forward across the Pacific, island by island, knowing the enemy can no longer afford catastrophic loss. The morning of June 4th still whispers through radio static, through glowing scopes, through briefing rooms heavy with cigarette smoke. It reminds them all, the future arrived once without warning. It will not do so again. Before Midway, the Imperial Japanese Navy carried a myth with it, unspoken, yet deeply believed. That Japanese seamanship was superior. That Japanese pilots were unmatched. That spirit and precision would overcome any material disadvantage. Midway shatters that myth, not in a single explosion, but in the quiet arithmetic that follows. Lost reports, pilot rosters crossed out, training pipelines unable to keep pace. For the first time, Japanese planners are forced to confront a truth they were never trained to accept. Courage cannot compensate for lost information. The Americans had fewer ships, fewer experienced pilots, less tradition, but they had clarity. At Midway, Japan fought the battle expected. The United States fought the battle that was actually happening. Radar, code-breaking, and flexible command turned a smaller force into a decisive one. This realization spread slowly through the Japanese Navy, resisted at first, then unavoidable. Some officers grasped it too late. Others never accepted it at all. For the Americans, Midway kills a different myth, the idea that survival depends on matching the enemy blow for blow. They learn instead to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. From this point forward, the war is no longer about proving superiority. It is about adaptation. And only one side is prepared to change fast enough. After Midway, commanders begin to speak in minutes, not miles, not tonnage. Minutes. How long until contact? How long until launch? How long until the enemy reacts? The Americans learn this lesson fastest. Radar contacts are plotted not just for location, but for intent. Course changes are anticipated. Strike windows are calculated with ruthless precision. A carrier task force is no longer just ships and planes. It is a moving clock, every action time to steal moments from the enemy. Japan struggles here. Their doctrine had been built around decisive engagement, the perfect strike at the perfect moment. But Midway proved that the moment itself could be taken away. That hesitation, even measured in minutes, could be fatal. At later battles, Japanese commanders often feel behind the tempo, reacting instead of dictating. Orders chase events already unfolding. Pilots launch in disguise that are no longer empty, no longer forgiving. American forces, by contrast, begin to dictate rhythm. They choose when to fight and when not to. They strike, withdraw, reposition, all guided by information flowing faster than any ship can move. Time has become a weapon, and Japan is losing it. What was once a war of bold thrusts and decisive clashes is becoming something colder, a grinding contest of awareness, logistics, and reaction speed. Midway did not just destroy carriers. It rewired how war at sea would be fought forever. For the men in the cockpits, Midway is not an abstract lesson. It is felt in the air. American pilots notice it first. Enemy formations appear earlier on radar. Intercepts happen farther from the fleet. Engagements begin higher, faster, cleaner. The sky no longer feels like a sudden ambush. It feels managed. Japanese pilots feel the opposite. Where once the enemy seemed slow to react, now fighters are already waiting. Surprise attacks dissolve into head-on clashes. Escorts are pulled away sooner. Losses come faster, with less warning. Veteran Japanese aviators understand what this means. They talk quietly among themselves about timing that feels wrong, about Americans who seem to know where they will be, about how every mission now feels like flying into a net instead of empty sky. New pilots, rushed into combat, have no context for the change. They simply experience the brutality, higher casualties, fewer victories, shorter lives. In American ready rooms, confidence grows, but so does discipline. Pilots learn to trust the unseen voices guiding them. The calm call over the radio, the vector adjustment, the warning that comes seconds before enemy aircraft break through cloud. It feels unnatural at first, then indispensable. The air war over the Pacific is no longer decided only by eyesight and instinct. It is decided by information, shared, processed, and acted upon faster than human reflex alone. Midway taught this lesson in fire. Every pilot who flies afterward carries it with them, whether they know its name or not. Institutions change slowly. War does not wait. After Midway, both navies feel the strain between tradition and reality. But only one bends. In Japan, doctrine hardens. Senior officers debate tactics in terms learned decades earlier. The decisive battle is still expected. The single crushing blow is still imagined. Adaptation comes in fragments, delayed by hierarchy and pride. Some commanders sense the danger. They argue for better coordination, improved radar use, more flexible air tactics. Their voices are often drowned out by the weight of past victories, by a belief that Midway was an anomaly, not a warning. The Americans treat it differently. After-action reports are dissected line by line. Failures are cataloged without ceremony. Torpedo tactics are questioned. Fighter coordination is rewritten. Nothing is sacred if it can be improved. This difference compounds. Each battle adds data. Each loss teaches a lesson. Each victory sharpens the machine. By late 1943, American carrier doctrine feels fluid, adaptable, responsive, ruthless in its efficiency. Japanese doctrine feels brittle by comparison. Cracking under pressure, it was never designed to absorb. Midway was not just a battle. It was a stress test. And under that pressure, one system evolved while the other resisted change until change was forced upon it. The consequences are approaching fast. By 1944, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. American carrier task forces no longer sail in ones and twos. They move in fleets. Essex-class carriers dominate the horizon, their decks crowded with aircraft, their radar mass bristling, their combat information centers humming day and night. This is Midway multiplied. Japan still fights with skill, still with courage, but now against an enemy who has mastered scale. Radar coverage overlaps. Fighter patrols rotate endlessly. Losses are absorbed, replaced, learned from. For Japan, every loss hurts more than the last. Pilots take off knowing there may be no replacement. Ships sortie knowing there may be no repair. Decisions that once carried risk now carry finality. At battles like the Philippine Sea, the difference is brutal. American radar vectors fighters directly into incoming Japanese strikes. Intercepts happen far from the fleet. Japanese air groups are shattered before they ever see their targets. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot is not luck. It is Midway perfected. Japan's remaining pilots fight valiantly, but they are fighting the future with the tools of the past. The wars become mathematical, attrition guided by detection, production guided by intelligence. The outcome is no longer in doubt. Only the cost remains unknown, and it will be staggering. Every war has a hinge, a point so quiet at first, so easily misunderstood, that its weight is only felt years later. Midway is that hinge, not because 4 carriers burned, though they did, not because the Pacific suddenly belonged to America. It did not, but because from that morning onward, the direction of effort reversed. Before Midway, Japan pushed. After Midway, Japan reacted. Every offensive action now carried hesitation. Every plan included contingencies that had never been needed before. The Imperial Navy still struck hard, still inflicted pain, but always with the awareness that the enemy might already be waiting. American commanders felt the change immediately. They planned deeper, moved farther, risked more. They were no longer racing against inevitability. They were shaping it. In war colleges decades later, Midway will be dissected not as a miracle, but as a demonstration of how information, timing, and adaptability can outweigh experience and tradition. The battle itself lasted hours. Its consequences spanned decades. And even now, long after the last carrier slipped beneath the waves, the Pacific still carries a memory of that tilt, the instant when certainty gave way to doubt and doubt to defeat. For the men pulled from the sea after Midway, the war feels different forever. Japanese survivors rescued by destroyers stare back at the smoke where their carriers burned, struggling to understand how an empire's pride vanished in a single morning. Many are veterans of Pearl Harbor, men who once believed the ocean itself bent to Japanese will. Now that belief is gone. Some will fight again, carrying the memory like a wound. Others will spend the rest of the war haunted by unanswered questions, not about bravery, but about blindness. American survivors feel something equally unsettling. They know how close it came, how thin the margin truly was, how a single failure in radar, a single error in decoding, could have reversed everything. Victory does not bring comfort. It brings responsibility. On both sides, Midway marks the end of innocence. The war is no longer a test of strength or honor. It is a test of endurance, adaptation, and learning faster than the enemy. Those who lived through it carry that knowledge into every future battle. Those who did not shape the war more than they ever knew. And the ocean keeps their silence. Long after the guns fell silent, Midway continued to fight. It fought in briefing rooms where officers traced carrier tracks across maps. It fought in training manuals rewritten in pencil, then ink. It fought in the instincts of commanders who hesitated just long enough to ask, "What am I not seeing?" For the Americans, Midway became a reference point, a quiet warning against complacency. Every time confidence grew too strong, someone remembered how close the disaster had come, how victory was earned not by certainty, but by doubt used wisely. For Japan, Midway lingered as a shadow. Plans grew more cautious, operations more defensive. The belief in a single, war-ending blow faded, replaced by a grim understanding that the conflict had become a war of exhaustion, one Japan could not win. Even as battles raged across the Solomons and beyond, Midway whispered its lesson. Information ignored as defeat invited. The battle never truly ended because its logic kept repeating. Detection before destruction. Understanding before action. Those who forgot paid for it quickly. Those who remembered survived. The Pacific War marched on, but Midway walked beside it, unseen, unavoidable. And ahead, the final reckoning waited. By late 1944, nowhere in the Pacific is truly unseen. American radar nets stretch across ocean and island alike. Long-range patrol aircraft sweep vast distances. Submarines report movements with deadly accuracy. What once required intuition now requires evasion, and evasion is becoming impossible. Japanese fleets feel exposed. Carriers sorting knowing their positions are likely already known. Airfields are struck before aircraft can disperse. Even night offers less protection than it once did. The ocean, once a cloak, has become transparent. This is Midway's final transformation. Power can no longer hide behind distance. Surprise can no longer be assumed. Silence no longer guarantees safety. American commanders exploit this relentlessly. They choose battles with overwhelming advantage, avoiding risk when patience will do more damage than courage. The war becomes asymmetrical, not in bravery, but in awareness. Japan is forced into extremes. Kamikaze attacks emerge not from tradition, but from desperation, an attempt to bypass detection with sacrifice instead of stealth. Even these strikes are often met early, intercepted before reaching their targets. Midway did not invent this reality. It revealed it, and once revealed, it could not be undone. The end of the war is approaching now. Not suddenly, but inevitably, shaped by a morning when the future arrived early and refused to leave. When the war finally nears its end, history will search for heroes. It will find pilots, admirals, ships burning in dramatic silhouettes. But Midway's true architects remain mostly invisible. They are the analysts who doubted initial assumptions, the radar operators who trusted faint signals, the commanders who resisted the urge to act too soon or too late. Their battlefield was not the deck or the sky. It was uncertainty. At Midway, the Americans did something rare in war. They accepted incomplete information and still made a decision. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but informed enough to seize the moment when it mattered most. Japan, by contrast, trusted what had always worked before. They trusted momentum. They trusted reputation. They trusted silence. And silence betrayed them. By 1945, the logic born at Midway governs everything, from fleet movements to air defense, from strategic bombing to amphibious landings. The principle remains the same. Those who see first shape the battlefield. The war's final acts are already written by this rule. The question now is not who will win, but how much will be lost before the realization becomes universal. One final section remains. The meaning of Midway, distilled. June 4th, 1942. It lasts only hours, yet it divides the war cleanly into before and after. Before Midway, Japan believed victory was a matter of timing. One more strike, one more perfect blow, and the Pacific would fall into silence. Before Midway, America fought from desperation, guessing the dark, hoping to survive long enough to learn. After Midway, that balance is gone. Japan never regained strategic initiative. Every operation from that point forward is shaped by loss, of carriers, of pilots, of certainty. The war becomes defensive, reactive, increasingly desperate. America, meanwhile, learns how to fight the future. Not louder, not braver, but smarter. Radar becomes instinct. Intelligence becomes doctrine. Patience becomes power. The Pacific is no longer a mystery to be crossed blindly. It is a system to be understood, predicted, and controlled. Midway is not remembered because it was the biggest battle. It is remembered because it was the clearest warning. A warning that wars are not won by confidence alone. That dominance can vanish in minutes. That the side which believed the war is already won is often the closest to losing it. Somewhere beneath the Pacific waves, the wrecks of 4 carriers still rest in darkness. They do not speak, but their silence says everything. Subscribe for more real World War II history, and hit like to support the channel. Japan's godlike Zero Aces roared with contempt at the grotesque American monster Hellcat, then were exterminated in the Marianas cataclysmic aerial holocaust. June 19, 1944, 0500 hours. The vast expanse of the Philippine Sea, 300 miles west of Saipan, where dawn cracks the horizon like a jagged wound. You feel the salt spray whipping across the flight deck of the Japanese carrier Taiho, flagship of Vice Admiral Jisubo Ozawa's mobile fleet. The air hums with the growl of Mitsubishi A6M0s warming up, their radial engines spitting blue exhaust flames into the pre-dawn gloom. Pilots in white scarves and leather helmets climb into cockpits, faces etched with the stoic resolve of samurai. Lieutenant Zenji Abe, a veteran ace with kills from Pearl Harbor etched on his fuselage, grips the stick, heart pounding in rhythm with the carrier's massive screws churning the waves below. These men are legends. The Zero, sleek, featherlight at 5,300 pounds, armed with 2 20mm cannons and twin machine guns, dances through the air like a predator unbound. No armor weighs it down. Speed and agility are its armor. Abe and his comrades have ruled the Pacific since December 1941, shredding American wildcats in dogfights over Guadalcanal and the Solomons. Ratios of 10 to 1, sometimes 20 to 1. They whisper a divine wind, kamikaze spirit, fueling their dives. Ozawa's fleet, 9 carriers for 130 aircraft, steams toward the American invasion force at the Marianas. Operation Ego launched to crush the Yankee advance once and for all. Below decks, mechanics bow in reverence to the machines. The sea rolls heavy, typhoon remnants stirring whitecaps that crash against hulls. Abe's radio crackles. Banzai for the Emperor. He throttles up, the Zero leaping off the deck into blood-orange sky. Ahead lies Task Force 58, Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher's behemoth with 15 carriers and over 900 planes. But to these aces, the Americans are fools in heavy crates. Yet, as Abe climbs to 20,000 feet, a shadow stirs on the radar scopes far away. Something new, something monstrous, waiting to pounce. November 1943. Flight deck of USS Enterprise, Task Force 50, Gilbert Islands Campaign. The first Grumman F-6F Hellcats thunder off the catapult. Their massive Pratt & Whitney are 2,800 engines roaring like enraged beasts. At 12,000 pounds fully loaded, more than twice the weight of the Zero, the Hellcat is a brute. 6.50 caliber machine guns in the wings, heavy armor plate behind the pilot, self-sealing fuel tanks, a cockpit canopy that can take a bullet. To the Japanese pilots who glimpse them from afar, it looks grotesque, a lumbering American monster built for comfort, not combat. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, commanding Air Group 15, pushes the throttle forward. The Hellcat surges ahead, climbing at a rate the old Wildcat could only dream of, 3,500 feet per minute. McCampbell has studied the enemy. He knows a Zero can outturn anything in a slow-speed knife fight. So the doctrine is simple: never play their game. Dive from above, strike with overwhelming firepower, extend away, hit and run. The Hellcat is built for exactly that: raw power, durability, the ability to absorb hits and keep fighting. Early encounters confirm the shift. In the skies over Tarawa and Macon, Hellcats tear into Japanese formations. A Zero tries to loop inside a Hellcat. The American pilot simply rolls away, climbs, and comes back down in a blazing deflection shot. Flames erupt. One Zero spirals into lagoon. Then another. Word filters back to the Japanese carriers. Pilots gather in ready rooms, shaking heads. Too heavy, they say. It will never match our maneuverability. Veterans like Warrant Officer Sadamu Kamachi, who has flown since China in 1937, dismiss reports of growing American successes. The new plane is a desperation measure, nothing more, but the kills mount. By spring 1944, the Hellcat's tally climbs past 1,000. Experienced Japanese pilots begin to vanish. The irreplaceable core, the men trained before the war, the aces with hundreds of hours in Zeros, are being bled away faster than new recruits can replace them. And now, in June, Ozawa launches his desperate counterstroke. His pilots, many with only months of training, climb into their cockpits believing the old myths still hold. They are about to learn how wrong they are. June 19th, 1944, 0830 hours. Radar screens aboard USS Lexington blaze with incoming blips from massive Japanese raid waves, over 300 aircraft strong, streaking toward Task Force 58. On the bridge of the Lexington, Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher peers through binoculars, voice calm over the TBS. Launch everything. Hellcats vector to intercept. Catapults hiss and slam. Hellcats roar off the decks in waves, climbing hard under full military power. Commander Dave McCampbell leads VF-15 upward, throttle firewalled. The double Wasp engine shaking the airframe with 2,200 horsepower. 60 miles out, Lieutenant Zenji Abe leads the first strike wave. 69 aircraft from Ozawa's carriers, Zeros escorting Judy dive bombers and Kate torpedo planes. Abe feels a familiar surge. The Americans are still launching, he thinks. We'll catch them flat-footed, just like Midway in reverse. But high above, unseen, the Hellcats are already diving. McCampbell spots the enemy formation at 25,000 feet. Perfect altitude advantage. Tally-ho, bandits below. The Hellcats roll over and plummet, blue noses glinting in the sun. Speed builds over 400 knots. Japanese lookouts shout warnings too late. The sky erupts. Tracers arc like golden rain. A Zero disintegrates mid-turn as 6.50 calibers hammer its fragile fuselage. Fuel tanks ignite. No self-sealing means instant fireballs. Abe whips his Zero into a desperate split S, but the Hellcat on his tail refuses to follow into the slow turn. Instead, it zooms past, climbs, and comes screaming back down. One Judy dive bomber folds its wings under concentrated fire and spirals into the sea. Then another. Kate's jettison torpedoes in panic, trying to flee. In minutes, the first wave is shattered. Over 40 Japanese aircraft gone, many before dropping a single bomb. Abe breaks away, heart-hammering, watching comrades burn and fall. The American fighters are everywhere, relentless, refusing dogfights, striking like hawks and vanishing upward. Back aboard the Japanese carriers, Ozawa receives a fragmented reports. Pilots claim the new enemy fighter is fast, heavily armed, impossible to shake. But the Admiral presses on. More waves are already airborne. He does not yet know that the slaughter has only begun.
June 19, 1944. Mid-morning. The Philippine Sea boils with chaos as the second and third Japanese raid waves, over 200 aircraft, plunge toward the American fleet. Hellcats swarm like a storm of steel hornets. Commander Charles Brewer, leading VF-16 from USS Lexington, dives through scattered clouds at 450 knots. gunsight fixed on a formation of Zeros, escorting WWII bombers. His wingman calls out, "Bogeys at 2 o'clock low." Brewer rolls inverted, pulls the nose down and fires a long burst. A Zero snaps in half, wings shearing off as the pilot bails into empty sky. Below, the Japanese pilots fight with desperate fury. Many are young, barely 100 hours in Zero, trained in haste as Japan's pilot pool evaporates. They try the old tactics. Tight turns, climbing spirals, luring the heavy Americans into slow-speed duels. But the Hellcats refuse the invitation. They boom down, fire, zoom upward again. The 6 Browning .50s chew through unarmored fuselages like chainsaws through paper. One burst, a flash, a fireball tumbling end over end. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alex Ratio, already an ace, claims 7 kills in 8 minutes. He spots a K-torpedo plane lumbering low, drops behind it, and sends it flaming into the waves. Then another, and another. His Hellcats' guns never seemed cool. On the radio, American voices crackle with controlled exhilaration. "Splash 1, Judy. Got a 0 on my 6. Somebody take him." Fox 2, Fox 3, he's burning. The Japanese formation disintegrates. Pilots who survive Guadalcanal and Rabaul watch in horror as rookies die by the dozen. No bombs reach the American carriers. Anti-aircraft fire from the screened ships barely fires a shot. The Hellcats have already done the killing high above. By noon, the scoreboard is apocalyptic. Over 240 Japanese aircraft destroyed, most in air-to-air combat. American losses, 29. The ratio approaches 20-1 in places. Ozawa, aboard the sinking Taiho, torpedoed by USS Albacore earlier, receives the reports in stunned silence. His 4th and final wave is still launching. The slaughter is far from over. June 19, 1944. Late afternoon, the sun hangs low over the Philippine Sea, turning the water into a mirror of fire as Ozawa's 4th and final raid, 128 aircraft scrape from depleted decks, launches into the blood-streaked sky. Many pilots are barely trained. Cadets pull from classrooms, given a few dozen hours in outdated trainers before being thrown into Zeros. They climb with mechanical determination, radios filled with forced shouts of "Banzai." But fear crackles beneath the bravado. Veterans like Lieutenant Kene Harada, who flew over Pearl Harbor, grip their sticks tighter than ever. He knows the odds. He has seen the earlier waves vanish. Aboard USS Essex, Commander David McCampbell, already with multiple kills today, leads another combat air patrol skyward. Fuel is low across the task force, but Mitcher's order stands. Destroy the enemy in the air. Hellcats streak westward at 300 knots, radar vectors guiding them unerringly toward the incoming swarm. Contact. The Japanese formation appears ragged, strung out, escorts struggling to maintain cohesion. Hellcats drop from 30,000 feet like meteors. McCampbell picks a Zero climbing desperately, fires a short burst, wings fold. The fighter flips once and plummets. His wingman splashes at Judy seconds later. Below, chaos reigns absolute. Japanese pilots scatter in every direction, some diving for cloud cover, others turning back toward their carriers in blind panic. Few bombs are dropped, few torpedoes armed. The Hellcats hunt methodically, guns hammering in disciplined bursts. Fireballs bloom across the horizon, orange, black, silent at this distance. Harada twists and turns, trying every trick from the old days. A Hellcat overshoots, but another takes his place. Tracers stitch across his wing. Fuel ignites. He pulls the canopy, bails out into empty air, parachute blooming as a Zero spirals down in flames. By dusk, the tally is complete. Over 600 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 373 in air combat alone, against 123 American losses, most from operational causes. 3 carriers sunk or crippled. Ozawa's mobile fleet limps westward, its air groups annihilated. The veterans, the godlike aces who once mocked the grotesque American monster, are gone, scattered across the sea or drifting beneath parachutes into captivity. Japan's naval aviation has been gutted in a single day, but the battle is not yet over. June 20th, 1944. Dusk falls crimson over the Philippine Sea as Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher makes the gamble that seals the battle's legend. From the bridge of USS Lexington, he watches the western horizon swallow the sun. Japanese carriers Zuikaku, Shokaku, Taiho already lost, flee at full speed 300 miles away. Fuel gauges on returning Hellcats flicker near empty. Many pilots will never make it back in the dark, but Mitcher utters the words that echo through history. Launch 'em, turn on the lights. Floodlights blaze across Task Force 58. Deck lights, searchlights, even star shells burst overhead. Beacons guiding the hunters home. Over 200 Hellcats, Avengers, and Dauntless roar westward into the gathering night, chasing Ozawa's retreating fleet. Lieutenant Commander Robert Winston leads a strike group low over the waves, radar guiding them through cloud banks. At 1900 hours, they spot the enemy. Carriers silhouetted against the dying light, escorts throwing up frantic anti-aircraft fire. Avengers bore in, torpedoes splashing into the water. Hellcat strafe decks, igniting parked aircraft in chains of explosions. The carrier Hio erupts in a massive fireball, her magazines detonating as Avengers torpedoes rip her open. She rolls and sinks, taking hundreds with her. Zuikaku and Chiyoda take crippling damage. Zero scramble desperately, but there are too few left. Pilot exhausted, aircraft fuel starved. Back over the task force, the night becomes a desperate ballet of survival. Hellcats ditch in the Black Sea, pilots bobbing in life rafts as destroyers race to rescue them. 80 aircraft are lost to fuel exhaustion or deck crashes in the dark, but the cost to Japan is incalculable. In 2 days, the Imperial Japanese Navy has lost 3 carriers, over 600 aircraft, and nearly all its remaining elite pilots. The Marianas Turkey Shoot, June 19th alone claiming 373 enemy planes, has annihilated the fleet air arm built over decades. No longer can Japan contest the skies. The road to Leyte, Iwo Jima, Okinawa lies open. As the last Hellcat traps aboard in the floodlit chaos, Mitcher stands silent on the bridge. The grotesque monster the Japanese once mocked has become their executioner. Japan's godlike aces are gone. The divine wind has turned against the Empire, and in the vast, indifferent Pacific, the tide of war has turned forever.
Subscribe for more World War stories. And hit the like button for motivational. Your one click on subscribe and give me motivation. Thanks. October 23rd, 1944. 0600 hours. The Philippine Sea churns under a blood-red dawn, waves slapping against the hull of the Japanese battleship Yamato like impatient fists. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita stands on the bridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the horizon where American silhouettes flicker like ghosts in haze. The air is thick with salt and diesel fumes, the deck vibrating underfoot from the massive engines propelling his center force toward Leyte Gulf. His officers murmur confidently, after all, the Yankees carriers? Laughable remnants. Pearl Harbor had gutted them. Midway a fluke they wouldn't repeat. Those flat tops are paper tigers. One captain scoffs, lighting a cigarette as radar pings echo faintly. Kurita nods, his mind on the Shogo plan, a desperate gambit to crush the invasion beaches, dismissing reports of Halsey's Third Fleet as exaggerated Allied bluster. But you imagine it. Feel the subtle shift in the wind, carrying the distant roar of engines not yet identified. Kurita's fleet steams on super battleships Musashi and Yamato, slicing through the swells like invincible leviathans, their 18-inch guns silent for now, crews drilling with mechanical precision. Torpedo boats skim alongside, lookouts straining against the rising sun. In Tokyo, admirals like Soma Toyota had mocked the American recovery. Their industrial might? A myth. We bled them dry. Intelligence dismissed the Essex-class carriers as rushed, vulnerable hulls crewed by green pilots. No one mentions the whispers of kamikaze desperation creeping into strategy sessions. Yet as the morning fog lifts, a scout plane crackles over the radio. Enemy carriers sighted, multiple groups. Kurita waves it off, ordering full speed ahead. The sea boils with anticipation, the first hints of doubt flickering in the eyes of junior officers wiping sweat from their brows. What if the reports are true? What if those dismissed carriers aren't fleeing, but hunting? The horizon darkens with shapes. American task forces closing in, unseen aircraft warming up on decks far away. Kurita's arrogance holds, for now. October 24th, 1944. 0800 hours. The sea beyond sea turns a deeper shade of blue, streaked with white foam as Kurita's center force steams eastward in tight formation. Alarms shriek across the fleet. Lookouts scream the warning. Enemy aircraft, high altitude. The sky, moments ago empty, now swarms with black specks. American dive bombers and torpedo planes from Task Force 38, launched hours earlier from carriers Kurita's staff had dismissed as crippled or non-existent. Hellcats streak overhead first, their wings glinting in the sun as they tear into the Japanese combat air patrol. Zeros twist and climb, tracers stitch in the air, but there are too many Americans. Too fast, too coordinated. On Musashi's massive bridge, Captain Kenkichi Kato grips the rail, watching helplessly as the first wave of Helldivers peels off and dives. The battleship's 18-inch guns roar skyward, black bursts blooming around the attackers. But the Americans press on. Bombs whistle down. The first hits shudder through Musashi's armored deck, like thunderclaps, sending shockwaves that rattle teeth and hurl crewmen to the steel floor. Water columns erupt alongside the hull as near misses drench the decks. Then a torpedo slams into her starboard bow. Metal screams. Compartments flood instantly. Kurita signals evasive maneuvers, the entire fleet zigzagging desperately. Smoke rises from Musashi as more waves strike. American pilots, faces grim behind goggles, line up again and again. You can almost feel the heat of their resolve. These are not the green aviators Japanese propaganda claimed. These are veterans, fueled by 3 years of island-hopping rage, now unleashed on the pride of the Imperial Navy. By noon, Musashi has taken 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. Her bows dip lower. Speed falls to 10 knots. Cruise battle fires below, pumping water in vain. On Yamato nearby, Kurita watches in silence as his sister ship lists heavily, realizing for the first time that the American carriers aren't just alive. They're hunting with overwhelming power. The radio crackles with frantic calls for air cover that never comes. Japan's land-based planes? Destroyed weeks ago. As the sun climbs higher, the attacks pause. Musashi still floats, defiant, but the sea around her is littered with debris and oil slicks. Kurita orders the fleet onward toward San Bernardino Strait. He doesn't yet know the next wave is already airborne. The sinking of Musashi. October 24th, 1944. 1,530 hours. The sea beyond sea is black with smoke, the horizon lost behind towering columns rising from the mortally wounded Musashi. American aircraft return in relentless waves. Over 200 sorties today alone, launched from carriers like Intrepid, Essex, and Lexington that Japanese planners had written off as sunk or scrapped. Hellcats strafe the decks first, machine guns hammering anti-aircraft crews into silence. Then the Helldivers scream down again, bombs punching fresh holes through armor meant to withstand anything. Torpedoes ripple in from both sides, Avenger pilots holding steady runs through curtains of flak. Below Musashi's waterline, damage control parties fight a losing war. Flooding surges through ruptured compartments faster than pumps can handle. Bulkheads groan and buckle. Men wade waist-deep in fuel oil and seawater, passing buckets in futile chains, their shouts drowned by the roar of incoming engines. On the bridge, Captain Kato refuses evacuation orders, voice calm over the intercom. Steady, men. We fight to the end. Kurita watches from Yamato, 3 miles away, as his flagship sister takes hit after hit. A torpedo tears into Musashi's bow. She plunges forward, propellers racing in air. Another strike amidships lists her 20 degrees to port. Crewmen slide across tilting decks, clean the gun tubs as secondary batteries fire defiantly into the sky. The sea around her churns with explosions, near misses lifting walls of white water that crash over the superstructure. By 1930 hours, the attacks finally cease. Darkness creeps in. Musashi is dead in the water, listing heavily, fires raging fore and aft. Kurita signals withdrawal northwest. his nerves shaken, believing the path to Leyte blocked. But in that moment of hesitation, he misses the truth. The American carriers have drawn off north, chasing a decoy force. Aboard Musashi, the order finally comes. Abandoned ship. Thousands of sailors leap into burning oil-slicked water as the great battleship rolls. At 1935 hours, she capsizes with thunderous roar, her massive pagoda masts smashing the sea. Over 1,000 men vanish with her. Kurita steams away into the night, unaware that San Bernardino Strait now lies open, and that the real trap is only beginning to close. The night passage in the ambush at Samar. October 25th, 1944. 0030 hours. The San Bernardino Strait lies shrouded in darkness. Rain squalls sweeping across the black water as Kurita's battered center force slips through unchallenged. No American ships guard the northern gate. Admiral Halsey has taken the bait, his fast carriers racing north after Ozawa's decoy force of empty flight decks. Kurita reforms his line, Yamato at the van, followed by battleships Nagato, Kongo, Haruna, heavy cruisers, and destroyers. Engines thrum low. Crews exhausted but alert, eyes burning from smoke and sleepless nights. The loss of Musashi still hangs heavy. No one speaks of it directly, but glances linger on the empty sea where she went down. Kurita presses south toward Leyte Gulf, believing the path to the American landing beach is now clear. Dawn approaches. Radar screens flicker. At 0630 hours, lookout spot mass on horizon. Smokestacks, then flight decks. American ships, but not the fast carriers Kurita expected. These are slow escort carriers, Jeeps codenamed Taffy 3, screened by destroyers and destroyer escorts, supporting the invasion with ground attack aircraft. Japanese spotters report excitedly, enemy carriers, battleships. Kurita believes he has caught the main fleet off guard. Guns elevate. Yamato's massive turrets train toward the tiny silhouettes. The range closes fast, 20 miles 15-10. Shells begin to fall. Aboard the American escort carrier Gamber Bay, Captain Viewig sounds general quarters as colored geysers erupt around his task unit. Destroyers Johnston, Hull, and Samuel B. Roberts charge forward in a desperate screen, laying smoke and firing torpedoes. Pilots scramble wildly from Jeep carrier decks. Many planes taking off unarmed just escape. You feel the chaos, the deck pitching under frantic feet, the thunder of Japanese 18-inch shells straddling the formation, water columns taller than the ships themselves rising and crashing down. Kurita's cruisers close to point-blank range. Gamber Bay takes the first direct hits, fires erupting along her flight deck. Destroyer Johnston steams straight at Yamato, guns blazing defiance. But the Japanese admiral hesitates. Radio chatter confuses his targets, reports of cruisers and carriers conflicting. Time slips away, and then the American aircraft return, not the fleet carriers, but every available plane from the Taffys, attacking with whatever they have. Bombs, depth charges, even empty strafing runs. The sky fills with fury. Kurita's fleet reels under the onslaught, unsure what monster they've truly awakened. The devastating reversal in Japan's broken fleet. October 25th, 1944. 0800 hours. Off Samar's rugged coast, the sea erupts in a maelstrom of fire and steel as Kurita's center force unleashes hell on the outgunned Taffy 3. Yamato's main batteries thunder, 18-inch shells arcing like meteors toward the fragile American escort carriers. Splashes tower around White Plains and St. Lo, drenching decks in saltwater fury. Destroyer Johnston, under Commander Ernest Evans, weaves through barrage, her 5-inch guns barking back impossibly. This is a fighting ship, Evans roars over the intercom, and we're going to fight. A torpedo spread launches. Miraculously, one strikes heavy cruiser Kamano, blowing off her bow in a spectacular detonation. Chaos reigns. American planes, some reloaded with whatever ordnance they could grab, rockets, machine guns, even dummy runs, dive repeatedly on the Japanese line. Cruiser Chokai takes a bomb hit, her torpedoes exploding in a chain reaction that rips her apart. Suzuya follows, torpedoed by destroyer Hirman in a suicidal charge. The air fills with the acrid stench of cordite and burning fuel. Pilots banking hard through flak bursts, their Wildcat and Avengers pressing attacks with raw desperation. Kurita, aboard Yamato, receives garbled reports. Phantom carriers, battleships everywhere. Paranoia grips him. These can't be mere escorts. It must be the full Third Fleet. At 0915 hours, he signals retreat. Cease action. All ships, retire at best speed. His fleet turns north, battered but not destroyed. Yet the damage is done. In the ensuing hours, American submarines and aircraft from the returning Halsey pick off stragglers. Battleship Congo sinks under torpedo attack. Cruiser Chikuma lists and vanishes beneath the waves. The reversal is complete. Japan's combined fleet, once the terror of the Pacific, lies shattered. For carriers, 3 battleships including Musashi, 6 heavy cruisers gone. The Imperial Navy's offensive power evaporates, never to recover. Ladies' beaches remain secure. MacArthur's return unhindered. Allied dominance seals the Philippines' fate, hastening the war's end. You stand on that bloody deck in your mind, witnessing the hubris crumble. The mocked American carriers rising as avengers, forever altering the tide. Subscribe for more World War stories. And hit the like button for motivational. You're one click on subscribe, and give me motivation. Thanks. June 4th, 1942. Central Pacific Ocean, nearly 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. There are moments in war where a single decision, made within minutes, can change the fate of nations. This was one of those mornings. As dawn breaks over the Pacific, the rising sun reveals nothing unusual, just endless blue water and a thin ring of coral barely visible against the horizon. Midway Atoll looks insignificant, easy to miss, easy to underestimate. But what happens here today will decide whether the United States survives the Pacific War or loses it. The air is heavy with salt. Heat is already building. The distant hum of aircraft engines drifts across the water, growing louder by the minute. On Midway's narrow airstrip, American pilots move quickly between their planes. Faces tight, voices low, eyes fixed on the sky. Most of them understand exactly what this morning could bring. Some have slept only minutes, others not at all. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the United States is still bleeding, still rebuilding. But today, for the first time, it is not waiting to be hit. Far beyond the horizon, unseen and confident, the Imperial Japanese Navy advances. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of Japan's combined fleet, believes this operation will decide the Pacific War. His plan is precise, complex, and ruthless. By attacking Midway, he intends to draw out America's remaining aircraft carriers and destroy them in a single decisive battle. Once that happens, Japan will dominate the Pacific. The United States, Yamamoto believes, will have no choice but to negotiate. The Japanese fleet is massive. 4 frontline aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, cut through the water in perfect formation. These are the same carriers that struck Pearl Harbor. Their decks are crowded with veteran pilots, elite crews, and aircraft maintained to perfection. Morale is high. Confidence is absolute. They believe the Americans are unaware. They are wrong. Hundreds of miles away, hidden beneath layers of cloud cover, 3 American aircraft carriers wait in silence. USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown, the last one hastily repaired after being badly damaged weeks earlier in the Battle of the Coral Sea. Japanese intelligence believes Yorktown is sunk. It is not. Aboard USS Enterprise, Admiral Raymond Spruance stands on the bridge, calm but fully aware of the stakes. He knows his carriers are outnumbered. He knows many of his pilots are inexperienced. He knows that if this battle is lost, Hawaii itself could be next. What gives him confidence is something invisible: information. In the months leading up to this morning, American codebreakers at Station HYPO in Hawaii, led by Commander Joseph Rockefort, have cracked critical parts of Japan's naval code. Through careful analysis, deception, and patience, they identify a mysterious target referred to as AF. To confirm it, Midway is ordered to transmit a fake message about a water shortage. Japanese intercepts soon report that AF is low on water. The trap is confirmed. Now, instead of reacting to a surprise attack, the United States is setting one of its own. At 4:30 a.m., Japanese aircraft begin launching toward Midway. Engines roar to life as bombers and fighters rise from carrier decks, climbing into sky. Their mission is simple: destroy Midway's defenses before the American fleet can interfere. On the island, radar operators detect incoming aircraft. Sirens scream. Pilots sprint for their planes. Anti-aircraft guns swing into position. Within minutes, the sky erupts, explosions tracer fire, smoke rolling across the runways. American aircraft take off anyway. They are slow. Many are outdated. Some are barely suited for modern combat. But they go, knowing the odds. As Japanese planes strike Midway, American commanders make their move. Spruants give the order. All available aircraft are launched toward the Japanese fleet, without perfect coordination, without a single unified strike, but with urgency overriding caution. This decision will cost lives. Squadrons become separated. Torpedo planes fly low and slow, expose enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire. One by one, they are cut down. Entire units are nearly wiped out. Pilots die without ever seeing the enemy carriers they were sent to destroy. From the Japanese perspective, the battle still appears under control. Midway is damaged. American attacks seem chaotic and ineffective. Their carriers continue operations, preparing a second strike. But beneath that confidence, cracks are already forming. Because while Japanese fighters are focused on killing torpedo planes at low altitude, something else is happening high above the clouds, unseen, unnoticed, and perfectly timed. And in the next moments, the entire war will pivot on what happens next. High above the Pacific, scattered American squadrons push forward through broken cloud layers, flying toward a target they have not yet seen. Navigation is uncertain. Fuel is limited. Radios crackle with fragments of orders, many of them incomplete. There is no second chance. If they turn back now, the Japanese carriers will survive the day. The first to arrive are the torpedo squadrons. At barely 120 knots, flying just above the waves, the planes are painfully slow. Most are Douglas TBD Devastators, already obsolete in 1942. Their crews know it. They know their aircraft lack speed, armor, and defensive firepower. They also know that to launch a torpedo, they must fly straight and level, making themselves perfect targets. Leading one of these squadrons is Lieutenant Commander John Waldron of Torpedo Squadron 8, launched from USS Hornet. Waldron realizes something is wrong almost immediately. The main strike group has flown off on a different heading. Waldron makes a decision that will define his legacy. He turns his squadron south. There is no escort, no fighters above them. Just 15 torpedo planes heading alone into the heart of the Japanese fleet. When they finally spot the carriers, Japanese Zero fighters dive instantly. The sky erupts with gunfire. One by one, American planes burst into flames or slam into the sea. Pilots press on anyway, skimming the waves, engines shaking, torpedoes armed. They never reach launch range. Of the 15 planes in Torpedo Squadron 8, only one survives. Ensign George Gay, wounded, pulls himself from the wreckage and floats in the water, watching the battle unfold around him. From the ocean's surface, he will witness what comes next. Other torpedo squadrons follow. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise and Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown. They suffer the same fate. Courage is not enough. Skill is not enough. The Japanese fighters tear them apart. From the decks of the Japanese carriers, officers watch the attacks with growing confidence. American coordination seems poor. Their planes are being destroyed in waves. The threat appears manageable, but there is a cost to this apparent success. To destroy the torpedo planes, Japanese fighters are pulled downward, chasing targets close to the sea. Combat air patrols lose their altitude advantage. Defensive formations stretch thin. Ammunition runs low. Pilots grow exhausted. And while all eyes focus downward, the skies above are slowly being emptied. Below deck on the carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, chaos builds. Aircraft that have returned from the Midway strike are being refueled and rearmed. Bombs are stacked in hangars. Fuel lines snake across the decks. Crews rush to prepare a second wave, unsure whether to strike Midway again or redirect against American carriers. Orders change, then change again. Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, commanding the carrier force, hesitates. Reports are confusing. An American fleet may be nearby or may not. He delays launch, then reverses course, rearming planes yet again. This indecision is fatal, because while Japanese decks fill with fueled aircraft and unsecured munitions, American dive bombers, lost, low on fuel, and searching desperately, finally find what they are looking for. At high altitude, 3 squadrons emerge almost simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, flying from USS Enterprise, has gambled everything on a single assumption, following a lone Japanese destroyer racing north at full speed. It leads him straight to the carriers. At 10:20 a.m., the clouds break. What the American pilots see below is staggering. For Japanese aircraft carriers sailing in tight formation, decks crowded with planes, smoke from Midway still drifting in the distance. For a brief moment, time seems to slow. Then the dive begins. American planes roll onto their backs and plunge almost vertically toward the carriers. Sirens scream aboard Japanese ships. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. Trace a round streak upward, but it is too late. The sacrifice of the torpedo squadrons has cleared the path, and in the next 5 minutes, the Imperial Japanese Navy will suffer a blow from which it will never fully recover. At 10:20 a.m., the sky above the Japanese fleet fills with falling aircraft. From more than 15,000 feet, American SBD dauntless dive bombers scream downward, engines howling as pilots fight gravity, speed, and fear. The ocean rushes up to meet them. Anti-aircraft fire explodes around their wings. Black bursts of flak punch holes through the air, but the formations hold. On the carrier Kaga, deck crews look up in horror. Planes are still being moved. Bombs lie exposed. Fuel hoses remain connected. There is no time to clear the decks. Lieutenant Clarence Dusty Kleiss lines up his target. The carrier fills his gun sight. He releases his bomb at barely 1,500 feet and pulls hard, blacking out as his aircraft tears away. Seconds later, the bomb punches through Kaga's flight deck and detonates deep inside the hangar. The explosion is catastrophic. Fuel ignites instantly. Armed aircraft detonate where they sit. Fire races through the carrier's interior, ripping through bulkheads and corridors. Within moments, Kaga is a burning wreck. Nearby Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship, tries desperately to evade. Her captain orders hard turns, but the ship is slow to respond. A single bomb strikes near the midship elevator, but it is enough. The blast ignites fuel vapors and torpedoes stored below deck. Fire spreads faster than it can be controlled. Nagumo is forced to abandon the bridge. On Soryu, the situation is no better. Multiple bombs slam into the deck in quick succession. Explosions tear through the carrier, throwing aircraft into the sea and killing crews instantly. Flames climb high enough to be seen miles away. In less than 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 frontline aircraft carriers are mortally wounded. From the water below, Ensign George Gay, clinging to his life raft, watches in disbelief. The carriers that had destroyed Pearl Harbor are burning. Thick columns of smoke twist into the sky. He realizes, even then, that he is witnessing history being rewritten. The shock aboard the Japanese fleet is total. Communications break down. Orders conflict. Damage control teams fight fires that cannot be contained. Aircraft that should have been airborne lie twisted and burning. Elite pilots, years of training, experience, and combat knowledge, are lost in moments. Only one carrier remains operational. Hiryu, her commander, Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, refuses to retreat. He understands the gravity of the situation immediately. If Hiryu can strike back quickly, if American carriers can be found and destroyed, the balance might still be restored. Within hours, Hiryu launches 2 counterattacks. Japanese dive bombers locate USS Yorktown, already weakened from the Coral Sea battle. Bombs slam into her deck. Fires erupt. The ship slows, listing heavily. For a moment, it appears Yorktown is finished. But American damage control crews perform what many consider a miracle. Within an hour, Yorktown is back underway. When Japanese torpedo planes arrive later that afternoon, they attack again. This time, their torpedoes strike true. Yorktown finally loses power and is abandoned. From the Japanese perspective, it looks like success. They believe they have sunk two American carriers. They are wrong again. Enterprise and Hornet are still operational, and they are already searching for Hiryu. Late in the afternoon, American dive bombers find their final target. Hiryu is still launching aircraft when the attack begins. Bombs crash through her deck, igniting fires identical to those that destroyed her sister ships. By nightfall, Hiryu is burning uncontrollably. Admiral Yamaguchi chooses to go down with his ship. As darkness falls over the Pacific, the scale of the disaster becomes clear. Japan has lost 4 aircraft carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and many of its most skilled pilots. The core of a defensive naval power has been annihilated in a single day. For the United States, the cost has been heavy. Yorktown lost hundreds of aircrew killed, but the strategic victory is undeniable. The balance of the Pacific War has shifted. What began as a desperate gamble has become a decisive turning point. But the consequences of this day will reach far beyond the burning wrecks left drifting in the ocean. As night settles over the Pacific on June 4th, 1942, the ocean is littered with burning debris. Oil slicks glow orange under moonlight. Wreckage drifts silently where some of the most powerful warships in the world once ruled the sea. The battle is not yet officially over, but its outcome is already sealed. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, the shock is profound. In less than 24 hours, Japan has lost 4 frontline aircraft carriers, the heart of its striking power. These were not just ships. They were symbols of Japanese dominance. Carefully trained crews, elite pilots, and years of naval doctrine built around carrier warfare. Unlike the United States, Japan cannot replace these losses quickly. Its industrial base is limited. Its pilot training pipeline is long and unforgiving. Each carrier lost at Midway takes with it something irreplaceable: experience. As dawn breaks on June 5th, Japanese commanders attempt to regroup. Admiral Yamamoto considers a counterstrike, but the reality becomes clear. His fleet is scattered. Communications are damaged. Fuel and aircraft are depleted. The American carriers remain active and dangerous. Reluctantly, Yamamoto orders a retreat. For the first time since the start of the war, Japan is pulling back, not because of strategy, but because it has no other choice. On the American side, the mood is cautious but electric. Aboard USS Enterprise, exhausted pilots return to their ships, many learning only hours later how close the battle truly was. Damage control crews work through the night. Medics tend to wounded airmen pulled from the sea. The victory feels unreal, almost fragile. Admiral Raymond Spruance does not celebrate. He understands what has happened, but he also understands what remains ahead. Midway has not ended the war. Japan still controls vast territory. The Pacific remains enormous, hostile, and deadly. Yet something fundamental has changed. For the first time, American commanders now truly believe, that Japan can be defeated at sea. News of the battle spreads rapidly. Within days, Washington understands the scale of what has occurred. Morale surges. The psychological wound of Pearl Harbor begins, finally, to close. Across the Pacific, Japan faces a harsh new reality. From this point forward, the Japanese Navy will fight defensively. Its strategy shifts from expansion to survival. Every operation becomes more cautious, every loss more painful. The confidence that once defined Japanese naval planning is gone. Midway has drawn an invisible line in the ocean. On one side lies Japan's rise. On the other, its long, grinding decline. And the war is far from over. In the weeks after Midway, the Pacific Ocean looks the same on a map, but in reality, it has been transformed. Quietly, almost invisibly, the balance of power has shifted. Before June 1942, the Japanese Navy dictated the pace of the war. It chose when and where to strike. American forces reacted, improvised, and absorbed blows. After Midway, that dynamic begins to reverse. The change is not immediate, and it is not dramatic, but it is irreversible. In Tokyo, naval planners study reports from the battle with growing alarm. The loss of Akagi Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu is catastrophic. But the deeper problem is harder to quantify. Japan has lost a generation of carrier aviators, men trained through years of intense selection and combat experience in China and the early Pacific campaigns. These pilots cannot be replaced quickly. Japan's training system prioritizes quality over quantity. It produces excellent airmen, but far too slowly for a prolonged war of attrition. By contrast, the United States is only just beginning to mobilize its industrial and human potential. Aircraft factories expand. Pilot training programs multiply. New carriers are already under construction. Midway does not end Japan's ability to fight, but ends its ability to dominate. American intelligence officers recognize this almost immediately. Analysts in Pearl Harbor and Washington pore over intercepted Japanese communications. The picture becomes clear. Japan is now reacting to events rather than shaping them. And reaction is a dangerous position in a global war. For the men who fought at Midway, the consequences are deeply personal. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, whose doomed torpedo squadron helped draw Japanese fighters away from the dive bombers, does not live to see the victory he helped secure. Many pilots who survived the battle return home quietly, their heroism known only to fellow servicemen. There are no grand parades. The war demands forward motion. Within months, American strategy pivots. In August 1942, U.S. Marines land on Guadalcanal. It is the first major American offensive of the war in the Pacific, and it would not have been possible without Midway. Japanese carrier strength is weakened. Their ability to contest American landings is limited. The initiative cautiously passes to the Allies. Yet Midway's influence goes beyond strategy and territory. It changes how the war is fought. Naval doctrine evolves rapidly. Commanders on both sides now understand that aircraft carriers, not battleships, are the true capital ships of modern warfare. Detection, timing, and intelligence become as important as firepower. A single mistake, a delayed launch, or a misread signal can decide the fate of fleets. Midway becomes a case study taught in war colleges for generations. It is studied not just for its outcome, but for its near failures. Had Japanese scouts found the American carriers earlier, had Nagumo launched immediately instead of rearming, had American dive bombers arrived minutes later, history could have taken a different path. But war does not reward hypotheticals. It rewards decisions made under pressure. And at Midway, American commanders, imperfect, exhausted, and uncertain, made just enough of the right decisions at the right moments. As the months turn into years, Japan's losses compound. Each carrier sunk afterward hurts more than the last. Each veteran pilot killed is harder to replace. By 1944, the once feared Japanese naval air arm is a shadow of its former self. The United States, meanwhile, grows stronger with each passing month. New carriers arrive in waves. Air groups rotate, train, and improve. Experience spreads rather than disappears. What began as survival becomes momentum. Looking back, historians will argue over which battle truly decided the Pacific War. Some point to Guadalcanal, others to Leyte Gulf. But all agree on one thing. Without Midway, none of them happened the same way. Midway is not the end of the story, but it is the moment the story changes direction. June 1942 fades into history, but the meaning of Midway only grows clearer with time. For the United States, this was never just a naval engagement. It was a test of survival, of learning speed, and of whether a nation still reeling from Pearl Harbor could adapt fast enough to stop a seemingly unstoppable enemy. At Midway, the U.S. Navy fought with fewer ships, fewer planes, and far less experience than its opponent. What it possessed instead was something less visible, but ultimately decisive: information, adaptability, and calculated risk. The American victory did not come from flawless execution. It came from commanders willing to act without certainty, from pilots who launched knowing they might not return, from intelligence officers who trusted broken fragments of intercepted messages enough to stake fleets on them. Had Midway been lost, the consequences would have been severe. Japan would have controlled the Central Pacific. Hawaii itself would have been under direct threat. American supply lines to Australia could have been severed. Any future offensive would have been delayed, perhaps by years. In a global war already stretching resources thin, time was the one thing the United States could not afford to lose. Midway bought that time. It bought breathing room. It bought confidence. It bought the chance to turn industrial power into strategic dominance. For Japan, the loss was more than material. It was philosophical. The belief in invincibility, carefully built since the victories of 1941, shattered in a single morning. From then on, every operation carried doubt. Every battle was fought with the knowledge that defeat was possible. That psychological shift mattered. Wars are not decided by numbers alone. They are decided by belief, by whether commanders think victory is inevitable or fragile. After Midway, American belief grew stronger. Japanese belief did not. Today, Midway stands as a reminder of how narrow the margins of history can be. A scout plane launched minutes late. A decision delayed by hesitation. A group of dive bombers arriving at exactly the wrong or right moment. Change any one of those, and the outcome might have been different. But history is not built on what might have happened. It is built on moments when everything hangs in the balance, and someone acts. At Midway, the United States acted, and by doing so, it ensured that the Pacific War would not be decided in Japan's favor, but fought, step by brutal step, all the way to its end. Subscribe for more World War stories. And hit the like button for motivational. Your one click on subscribe and give me motivation. Thanks. Imagine standing on a 400-foot cliff in one of World War II's bloodiest battles, explosions all around, wounded men crying for help, bullets flying everywhere. You have no rifle, no pistol, no weapon at all. Everyone else is retreating for their lives, but you stay behind, and in the next few hours, you save 75 lives. This is not fiction. This is a true story of Desmond Doss, a simple man from Virginia who refused to kill, yet became one of America's greatest war heroes. He was the first conscientious objector ever to receive the Medal of Honor. This is the real story behind Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond Thomas Doss was born on February 7, 1919, in Lynchburg, Virginia, into a devout Seventh-day Adventist family. Religion wasn't just Sunday church for the Doss family. It was their entire way of life. Desmond took the Bible commandments very seriously, especially the 6. Thou shalt not kill. He believed it meant exactly what it said. No killing, ever. As a young boy, Desmond saw something that changed him forever. His father, a World War I veteran haunted by what he'd seen, got into a violent argument with his uncle. In the heat of the moment, his father pulled a gun. Desmond jumped between them and stopped the fight. From that day, he made a promise to himself. He would never touch a firearm. Growing up during the Great Depression, Desmond worked hard to help his family. He was kind, quiet, and deeply faithful. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, and America entered the war, millions of young men rushed to enlist. Desmond felt the call too. He wanted to serve his country. But he told the recruitment officer clearly, I'll serve in combat if needed, but I will not carry a weapon. I want to save lives, not take them. He signed up as a combat medic. Desmond entered the Army in 1942, full of patriotism and faith. But the Army wasn't ready for someone like him. In boot camp at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Doss immediately stood out, and not in a good way. He refused to touch a rifle during weapons training. He refused to train or do duties on Saturday, his Sabbath day of rest. To his fellow soldiers, this made no sense. They called him a coward, a slacker, a religious nut. They bullied him relentlessly, hiding his belongings, throwing shoes at him while he prayed, even beating him up. Officers saw him as a problem. They gave him extra duties, tried to pressure him into carrying a weapon, and threatened to court-martial him for disobeying orders. One captain told him straight, "Private Doss, you're a liability. You're going to get men killed. I'll make sure you never see combat." Desmond's commanders even tried to have him discharged on mental grounds. Section 8, they called it, but Desmond refused to quit. He wrote letters home saying, "I know they hate me now, but one day they'll understand." He kept his faith strong. Every Sabbath, He'd find a quiet place to read his Bible. He studied medicine hard and became one of the best medics in his unit. Slowly, a few soldiers began to respect him for standing by his beliefs, but most still saw him as weak. Finally, after months of struggle, Dawes graduated as a medic and was assigned to the 77th Infantry Division, headed for the Pacific. His unit shipped out thinking they had a weak link. They had no idea that the man they mocked as a coward would soon become the bravest soldier they'd ever know. The real test was coming, on a cliff in Okinawa that would be known forever as Hacksaw Ridge. By early 1945, the war in the Pacific was entering its final